and this individual will come to embody the dominant character traits of the particular regime. The remainder of the Republic is again devoted to crafting a regime that will produce a distinctive kind of human character. And that, of course, is why the book is a utopia. There has never been a regime in history that was so single-mindedly devoted to the end of producing that rarest and most difficult species of humanity called simply philosopher. So, city and soul. That leads to our next topic that I want to pursue for the remainder of the class, the reform of poetry and the arts. Socrates' city and speech proceeds through several stages. The first stage, proposed by Adeimantus, is the simple city, what he calls the city of utmost necessity. That is, a city limited to the satisfaction of certain basic needs. The primitive or simple city, the city of utmost necessity, again, it expresses the nature of Adeimantus's own soul. There's a kind of noble simplicity in him that treats subjects as bodies or creatures of limited appetites. The simple city is little more than a combination of households designed for the sake of securing one's existence. And at this point, and you can hear his brother chastising him, at this point Glaucon retorts that it seems as if Adeimantus has created a city only fit for pigs, a city of pigs. Are we only such that we want to feed at a common trough? Is there nothing more to politics than that? And Glaucon says, where are the luxuries? Where are the relishes, he asks. Where are the things that make up a city? And here too, Glaucon's city expresses his own tastes and his own soul. The warlike Glaucon would preside over what Socrates calls a feverish city, one that institutionalizes honors, competitions, and above all, war. If Adeimantus again expresses the appetitive part of the soul, Glaucon represents that quality that Plato calls spiritedness, or thumos in Greek. Spiritedness is the central psychological quality of the Republic. The entire thrust of the book is devoted to the taming of spiritedness and to the control of spiritedness. Spiritedness is that quality of soul that is most closely associated with the desires for honors, fame, and prestige. It is a higher order psychological quality. It is what seeks distinction, the desire to be first in the race of life and lead us to seek to dominate others. We all know people of this sort, do we not? And we all, to some degree, embody this quality in ourselves. It is the quality that we associate with being a kind of alpha personality. This is the issue for Socrates, how to channel this wild and untamed passion of spirit or heart, how to channel this to some kind of common good. Can it be done? How can we begin the domestication of the spirited Glaucon? The rest of the book is to some degree about taming, asking the question whether Glaucon can be tamed. And it is here that Socrates turns to his first and perhaps even his most controversial proposal for the establishment of the just city. The creation of the just city can only begin, he says, with the control of music, poetry, and the arts. And this is where Plato's image as an educator derives. The first order of business for the founder of a city, any city, is the oversight of education. And his proposals for the reform of poetry, especially Homeric poetry, represent clearly a radical departure from Greek educational practices and beliefs. Why is this so important for Socrates? Ask yourself, if you were founding a city, where would you begin? Socrates' belief, or his argument, seems to be something like this. It is from the poets, and I mean that in the broadest sense of the term, myth makers, storytellers, artists, musicians, today we might say film producers and film and television producers. It is from these people that we receive our earliest and most vivid impressions of heroes and villains, gods, and the afterlife. These stories, the stories we hear from earliest childhood on, shape us in some very meaningful sense for the rest of our lives. And the Homeric epics were, of course, for the Greeks, what the Bible was for us, maybe even is in some communities. The names of Achilles, Priam, Hector, Odysseus, Ajax, these would have been just as familiar and important to the contemporaries of Plato as the names of Abraham, Isaac, Joshua, and Jesus are for us. Plato's critique of Homeric poetry in the Republic is twofold. It is both theological and political. Maybe you might even say, following Spinoza, that this is the core of Plato's theological-political treatise here. The theological critique is that Homer simply depicts the gods as false, as fickle and inconstant. He presents them as beings who are unworthy of our worship. More importantly, the Homeric heroes are said to be bad role models for those who follow them. They are shown to be intemperate in sex, overly fond of money, and to these vices, Socrates adds cruelty and disregard for the dead bodies of one's opponents. The Homeric heroes are ignorant and passionate men full of blind anger and desire for retribution. How could such figures possibly serve as good role models for citizens of a just city? And Socrates' answer is, of course, the purgation of poetry and the arts in books 2 and 3. He wants to deprive poets of their power to enchant, and something Socrates admits in the 10th book of the Republic, to which he himself has been highly susceptible to the enchantment of the poets. We need to deprive, again, the poets, the song makers, the lyricists, the musicians, the myth makers, the storytellers, all of them, the power to enchant us. And in place of the pedagogical power of poetry, Socrates proposes to install philosophy in its place. As a result, the poets will have to be expelled from the city. Imagine that. Sophocles will be expelled from the just city that Socrates wants to create. This always raises the question that you will discuss in your section, whether or not Socrates' censorship of poetry and the arts is an indication of his totalitarian impulses. This is the part of the Republic most likely to call up our own First Amendment instincts. Who are you, Socrates? We are inclined to ask, to tell us what we can read, hear, and listen to. And furthermore, Socrates seems to be saying not that the Kallipolis will have no poetry and music, it will simply be Socratic poetry and music. And here's another question which you will no doubt be concerned to discuss, namely, what would such Socratically purified music and poetry look like? What would it sound like? I don't know that I have an answer to this, but perhaps the Republic as a whole is itself a piece of this Socratic poetry that will substitute for the Homeric kind. But it's important to remember that the question of education and the question of the reform and censorship and control of poetry is introduced in the context of taming the warlike passions of Glaucon and others like him. The question of censorship and the telling of lies is introduced, in other words, as a question of military necessity, controlling the guards or the auxiliaries of the city, its warrior class. Nothing is said here about the education of farmers, artisans, merchants, laborers, the economic class. Maybe to speak bluntly, Socrates just doesn't care that much about them. It's okay what they listen to. Nor has anything really been said up to this point about the education of the philosopher. His interest here is in the creation of a tight and highly disciplined cadre of young warriors who will protect the city much as watchdogs protect their own home. That is to say, recalling Polemarchus, those who are good to friends and bark and growl at strangers. Such individuals will substitute their own desires and pleasures to the group and live a life by a strict code of honor. We have to ask, are Socrates' proposals unrealistic? Are they undesirable, or are they desirable? They are not undesirable if you believe, as he does, that even the best city must provide provisions for war, and therefore a warrior's life, a soldier's life, will require harsh privation in terms of material rewards and benefits, as well as a willingness to sacrifice for others. It would seem far from being unrealistic. Socrates engages what we might call maybe a kind of Socratic realism. Far more unrealistic would be the belief of those who argue, and I'm thinking here of names like Immanuel Kant and others from the 18th and 19th century, that one day we can abolish war altogether and therefore abolish the passions that give rise to conflict and war. So far, Plato believes, as the passionate or spirited aspect of human nature remains strong, so long will it be necessary to educate the warriors of society who defend it. So on that, I'm going to end today, and next time we will talk about justice, the philosophers, and Plato's discovery of America.